Now look, don't get me wrong. This video isn't going to be talking about news updates or things that we have speculated about that insiders are talking about. No. Take a look at the title of this video. I am asking you a question. In this video, we're going to be talking about Philadelphia Flyers defenseman Shayne Gostisbehere, who has been in a really rough patch of hockey as of late. Now, the reason we're talking about Gostisbehere is because I want to bring him up as a subject of discussion to Habs fans. I'm a guy on YouTube who has a very large Montreal Canadiens fan base, and as a result, I think it would be very invoking to discuss this kind of topic because Shayne Gostisbehere is in a weird spot with the Flyers. If you take a look at this article over here on thescore.com, written by Josh Wegman 5 days ago, he has one off-season question for each Metropolitan Division team. In this article, he goes over each of the Metro teams, has a very insightful and discussion-worthy question for each of these teams, but the one I wanted to focus on was the Philadelphia Flyers, because his question for the Flyers is, will Shayne Gostisbehere get moved? Now, to build up the context around this, let's go over the 3 paragraphs that are written over here in this article. Shayne Gostisbehere has fallen out of favor in Philly. The 26-year-old tallied just 12 points in 42 games and was routinely a healthy scratch for the club this season. However, he's just 2 years removed from a 65-point campaign, and his $4.5 million cap hit through 2022-23 is quite enticing for other teams. Trading Gostisbehere this offseason would be selling low, but his departure would give the Flyers more flexibility to re-sign fellow defensemen Justin Braun, Robert Hägg, and Philippe Myers. Dealing Gostisbehere would have seemed unthinkable 2 years ago, but the emergence of Ivan Provorov and Travis Sanheim has made him expendable. It's time for Gostisbehere to get a fresh start. Which is why, taking a look at this, I thought about it, I let it absorb within my frame of mind for a second, and I sat there and I thought to myself, I wonder what Habs fans think. Because we've made 2 videos about Shayne Gostisbehere and the Habs. The first one was back in the summer of 2019, where trade rumors were very, very prevalent, and there was an idea floating around that a Paul Byron, Andrew Shaw for Gostisbehere trade was on the horizon. When we made that initial video, I had a very fair amount of comments in the comments section below saying that they would have been good with it, and in fact, they would do it. Now obviously that didn't happen. Byron and Shaw stayed on the Habs after, and Gostisbehere stayed on the Flyers, but the idea was there. Later on though, towards the end of the year, the calendar year, December 2019, we had another big push of trade rumors linking Shayne Gostisbehere to the Habs once again. That didn't eventually happen, and now we're sitting here in the offseason, or at least what I am going to be calling the offseason. So Habs fans, talk to me in the comments below. Shayne Gostisbehere, assume he is available. What is the maximum amount of prospects, picks, assets, players that you're willing to give up for a player like this? Because a player like this in Shayne Gostisbehere, despite being 2 years removed from a 60-point campaign, is at an all-time low trade value-wise. He's weightless in this market now, and if there was a time for a team to try to get a bargain of a deal for a Gostisbehere, it's now. So, with this in mind, I'm putting the question out to the floor, to you, the viewer out there watching this video. Comment down below what you would like to give up, and what you wouldn't want to give up. Because last time we made this video, there was a very big presence in my comments that said, hey, if the Habs are going to get rid of a top prospect, a Caulfield, at the time there was Suzuki, a Romanov, whatever, then no, we're not doing that. Heck no, I'm keeping my prospects. You can stay over there in Philly, Shayne Gostisbehere. But If a team like Philadelphia is desperate to get that cap space to re-sign their other D-men, and if they can be in a position to expend a Gostisbehere because of the rise to greatness of Provorov and Sanheim, then I'm not too sure a top prospect is going to be what's needed to pry away a Gostisbehere from Philly. Especially given the context that the guy was injured for a while, he got loaned over to Lehigh Valley on a conditioning stint, he came back to the NHL and he was not really that great. The guy got 5 goals all season. 12 points in 42 games played is not a very significantly high number, and it definitely is not at the same caliber as his 65 points was 2 years ago. Even though the value is at an all-time low, there still is a possibility that a 60-65 point Shayne Gostisbehere does exist within that frame. Seriously, he's only 26. Assume the Montreal Canadiens grab this player and assume they use him properly. Assume they develop him right, and assume that he actually comes back to form, maybe not to the 65 point plateau that he was 2 years ago, but maybe even just 45 or 50 points. Imagine if you're able to get a guy like that on your left side. The right side's pretty stacked. It's always been Weber and Petrie leading the charge. The left side is where the Habs need work, which is why a guy like Alexander Romanov is so valuable to Habs fans, because his value as a positional player is so desperately needed in this lineup. Add a Shayne Gostisbehere, a left-handed guy who probably still has 50-point potential, and all of a sudden your top pairing, whether it's Weber Gostisbehere or you move Gostisbehere to the second pairing with Petrie, your top 4 looks insanely better. And I know Habs fans out there definitely are drooling at that idea of a very fluid, transitionally sound, really skilled offensive defenseman being slotted onto that left side. But of course, that really sleek, fluid offensive defenseman hasn't really shown himself off over the past few months. So that's why the question of what you would give up is a very interesting one. The writer of this Score article talks about how Gostisbehere does indeed need a fresh start. And with the Montreal Canadiens being linked to this player before, there's certainly room to argue that interest may not have waned over the past few months. As for me personally, I, like the majority of the commenters in the previous Gostisbehere Habs video, would not want to give up a Caulfield or a Romanov or whatever for a guy who could bust and who could only put up 15 points in a full season. Obviously, I don't want to do that. But when you take a look at the Canadiens and you take a look at their surplus, take a look at things they have a lot of, hey, what do they have a lot of? They have a lot of draft picks. They have a lot of draft picks, and as noted in our prospects tier list video a few days ago, which you probably should check out if you haven't already, they have a lot of prospects already. The Habs are in a position where they have a ton of top elite guys in Caulfield, Romanov, Primo, etc. They have a ton of top 6, top 4 guys like Ryan Poehling and Matthias Norlinder and Jaden Struble. And they have a lot of guys who, in my opinion, max out as middle 6, bottom of the lineup players. To me, the Habs don't need any more of those, and as a result, they don't need all too many draft picks either. Give up a few picks, and maybe the rights to a McShane, a Fonstad, a Hood, whatever. You got a lot of prospects and a lot of picks. Not all of those project to be elite or top 6 caliber. So the ones who aren't, probably those guys are the guys that I can say, yeah, I'd be willing to part with this for a Gostisbehere. If the Flyers are desperate, then the Flyers are desperate. You take advantage of that. If a team is in a position where they can and they want to move a guy because they need the money for other players, you take advantage of that. And if Marc Bergevin wants to try it out, then hey, the guy's been one of the busiest GMs over the past few years when it comes to making trades. I'm sure there is a talk going on in some form. So, with that in mind, comment down below what you think. What would be the max amount of assets, prospects, or picks that you would give up for a Shayne Gostisbehere? Gostisbehere's not guaranteed to be bad again, but he's certainly not guaranteed to be great again either. So what do you think is the max that you would go that you think would be worth the risk? I hope you enjoyed this video, social that 99, and bye.